In the cold vacuum of deep space, the ESS Endeavour cruised along the starlit boundary of the Xelari expanse. Captain Lila Morgan stood at the helm, gazing out at the alien world below. Its blue surface swirled beneath two binary stars, casting a pale, shimmering light across the distant horizon. Towering crystalline spires punctuated the surface like jagged lightning bolts frozen in time. Humanity had long speculated about the Xelari, an advanced race that had remained hidden throughout galactic conflicts, offering no signs of life, no communications. Silence, always silence. But now, after decades of cautious observations and far-off probes, the message had come. "Bridge, this is Morgan," she commanded, her voice steady. "Initiate descent burn. Alert the Xelari delegation of our arrival." Her officers exchanged nervous glances, the weight of the moment palpable. The first direct contact with the Xelari was a historic event. It could mean unprecedented cooperation, or disastrous conflict. As the Endeavour began its slow descent, Morgan couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was more than a diplomatic meeting. The unknown always carries with it a certain weight, one that pressed against her chest, a feeling that the galaxy had shifted somehow. Why now? Why had the Xelari chosen this moment to reach out? She crossed her arms, her fingers tightening around the fabric of her uniform, as the ship's engines hummed gently beneath her. The silence was deafening, and she couldn't help but wonder if they had made a mistake by coming here at all. The landing pad of Xelari Prime was unlike anything Morgan had ever seen. The ground shimmered with iridescence, its surface alive with an energy that radiated from beneath the crystal structures rising like sculptures of glass and light. As the Endeavour touched down, its presence seemed to shift the air itself, causing it to hum in response. A delegation of Xelari stood at the edge of the landing pad, tall and elegant, their translucent skin refracting light into a dazzling array of colors. They moved with grace, like living prisms, their presence exuding a quiet, otherworldly power. At the front was their leader, Ambassador Velan. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his eyes glowing faintly with an inner light. His voice was deep, resonating in Morgan's skull rather than her ears. "Captain Morgan of Sol. Welcome to Xelari Prime." Morgan stepped forward, extending her hand in a gesture of peace. "I come in peace," she said, her voice firm. Velan regarded her hand for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Instead of accepting her gesture, he turned and began to walk towards the massive structure ahead of them, the Hall of Harmonies. The towering crystal spires lining the path pulsed with light as if alive. The air hummed with strange frequencies, resonating with an alien energy that seemed to wrap around her very thoughts. As they entered the Hall of Harmonies, the atmosphere shifted, the air vibrating with an almost musical quality. Velan's voice broke the silence, his words cutting through the frequencies. "We've detected your expansion," he said, his tone calm but firm. "Your colonies near the void. That is unacceptable." Morgan's heart skipped a beat. "We've claimed no Xelari worlds," she replied, her voice steady, though she could feel the tension in the air. "The sector was uninhabited." Velan's gaze lingered on her, his expression hardening. "You do not understand," he said softly, halting in his tracks. "That region is not forbidden because of ownership. It is forbidden because of what sleeps there." Back aboard the Endeavour, Captain Morgan gathered her senior staff in the briefing room. She paced back and forth, trying to make sense of the conversation she'd just had with Velan. There was an air of something unspoken in his words, an underlying fear that chilled her more than any enemy ship ever could. "They're not angry because we invaded," Morgan said, her tone sharp. "They're scared. Something out there terrifies them." Dr. Yara Hessa, the ship's science officer, adjusted her glasses and brought up a holographic display of the void sector. Her fingers danced over the controls, pulling up a set of strange readings. "We've been picking up a pattern near those outer colonies," Yara said, pointing to the display. a low-bandwidth signal. It repeats every 47 seconds, like clockwork. Origin? Morgan asked, her brow furrowing. The void sector had always been an area of concern: black holes, anomalies, unexplored dead systems. But this was something different. Yara's fingers moved over the controls again. Unknown. But it's spreading, Captain. It's not just one signal anymore. It's like it's reaching out, expanding. Morgan leaned back in her chair, staring at the display. The signal seemed innocuous at first glance, but there was something unsettling about it, a nagging sense of dread that she couldn't shake. She turned to Yara. Can you trace it? No, Yara said, her voice quiet. It's unlike anything we've encountered before. It's as if it's trying to remain undetectable, yet it's growing stronger. That night, Morgan lay in her quarters, tossing and turning. Her sleep was filled with fragmented dreams, images of stars collapsing and distant cries, faint whispers in her mind, echoes of something far beyond human comprehension. In the distance, through the blackness of the void, she could feel it watching her. Waiting. The next morning, Velan led Morgan through a massive corridor that stretched deep beneath the surface of Xelari Prime. The walls were lined with shimmering threads of light, each one connecting to a vast web of information. They descended into the heart of the Xelari civilization, the Crystal Archive. The archive was unlike any data repository Morgan had ever seen. It wasn't just a place of storage, it was a living, breathing entity. Above her head, threads of light twisted and danced, forming ephemeral images of distant stars and civilizations long forgotten. As they walked deeper into the archive, Velan spoke. We fought it once, he said, his voice low, almost haunted. We called it the Null Weave. It consumes sentience. It does not destroy planets, it erases meaning. Language. Thought. Identity. Morgan's heart sank as the images on the walls flickered, showing once brilliant civilizations dissolving into static, their histories wiped clean. We sealed it inside the void, Velan continued, his gaze distant, as if reliving a painful memory. But now, your probes, your expansions, they have stirred it. Morgan's breath caught in her throat. She felt a cold sweat break out across her skin. You brought us here to threaten us? She asked, the words heavy with disbelief. No, Captain, Velan said softly. We brought you here to warn you. The tension aboard the Endeavour escalated after the unsettling revelation about the Null Weave. The crew was on edge, knowing that their very presence in the void sector had triggered something ancient and terrifying. But things took a darker turn when the ship itself was sabotaged. Late one night, alarms blared through the ship. Morgan raced to the control room, her mind already running through the worst-case scenarios. As she entered, she saw the crew scrambling, trying to stabilize the reactor before it reached critical levels. Report, she demanded. Reactor breach, Captain, Lieutenant Commander Bryce reported, his voice tight with strain. We're losing power. Morgan's eyes narrowed as she scanned the room. Something wasn't right. Bryce was one of her most trusted officers, yet his expression was full of guilt, like a man caught in the act. When the situation was finally contained, Morgan pulled Bryce aside. What happened? She demanded, her voice icy. I had orders, Bryce spat, his eyes wild with fear. From the Joint Intelligence Council. They knew about the signal. They wanted to provoke the Xelari. Get them to reveal their technology. We needed to force their hand. Morgan's jaw tightened in anger. Earth was willing to risk war with the Xelari, just for technology? She ordered Bryce confined to quarters and sent an urgent message to High Command. She didn't care what they thought about her decision. This is Captain Morgan. The threat is real. Cease all void expansion immediately. The reply came hours later. Acknowledged. Continue negotiations, but secure strategic advantage if possible. They didn't believe her. The tension on the Endeavour had reached a boiling point. Captain Morgan stood in front of the command console, her fingers clutched tightly around the edges, eyes scanning the reports that had flooded in. Bryce's sabotage was just the beginning. The message from High Command was a chilling reminder of how little they understood of the true nature of the threat they were facing. Humanity had a way of pushing forward, always reaching for more, but now, they were in deep, uncharted waters. "Captain, we're receiving more disturbances from the void," Yara's voice broke through the silence, drawing Morgan's attention. "The signal's growing in intensity, and we've detected a fluctuation in the dark matter around it. It's shifting, Captain. It's almost as if it's waking up." Morgan's pulse quickened. They were running out of time. "Can we trace it? Identify where the signal's coming from?" Yara shook her head. "It's too erratic. It's like trying to follow smoke. But it's almost as if it's trying to communicate with something we can't detect." Her words hung in the air, as if the void itself were listening, waiting for an answer to something that humanity could never understand. Morgan's instinct screamed at her to get answers, to force some clarity out of the chaos. "Prepare the crew," Morgan ordered, her voice steady. "We're going to make contact with the Xelari again. We can't afford to wait any longer." As the Endeavour moved deeper into the void sector, Morgan watched the galaxy unfold before her. The stars seemed distant, cold. The Xelari were hiding something that could change everything. But would they tell her? Or would the truth be lost in the endless dark? The meeting with Velan and his delegation was tense. The Xelari leader stood at the center of the grand chamber, his eyes glowing softly, his gaze piercing through Morgan. The air between them crackled with unspoken words, with ancient secrets and the weight of untold history. "You've brought us to the brink of extinction," Velan said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet it carried the force of centuries. "You've touched the very edge of the darkness." Morgan's eyes narrowed. "We didn't ask for this, Velan. We were merely trying to expand, to explore." Velan's expression remained impassive, but his next words sent a cold shiver through her. "Exploration is a dangerous thing when you do not understand what you seek. The void is not a place for curiosity. It is a prison for the Null Weave." Morgan's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of what Velan was saying. The Null Weave. It's not just a signal, is it? It's not just an anomaly. It's a force. Velan nodded slowly. A force that consumes the essence of all sentience. It does not destroy, Captain, it erases. It unravels thought, consciousness, history itself. We sealed it away long ago, before your kind had even reached the stars. Morgan's breath caught in her throat. "How?" "We bound it in the void," Velan continued, his voice growing darker. "The fabric of space and time itself was used to imprison it. But now, your arrival has disrupted that delicate balance. Your probes, your expansions, they've caused the threads to fray." A chill ran down Morgan's spine as the magnitude of the danger became clear. This wasn't just a threat to the Xelari. It was a threat to the entire galaxy. And humanity had unknowingly played a part in waking it. "The Xelari have tried to hold it at bay for millennia," Velan said. "But you have unleashed something that no one can control." As the Endeavour prepared to leave the surface of Xelari Prime, Morgan felt the weight of the situation settling in. The Xelari had shared what they knew, but there was still so much they weren't saying. The Null Weave was a cosmic force, ancient and terrifying, and now it was reaching out to consume the galaxy. But there was still a question that lingered in her mind. "Why didn't you warn us sooner?" Morgan asked Velan, her voice cutting through the silence of the ship's landing bay. The crew was busy with preparations, but Morgan felt the heaviness of the moment press against her chest. Dylan's expression remained unreadable. "We did not think you would reach this far," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "And we believed that your species, with its fleeting history and chaotic nature, would never disturb the balance." Morgan's gaze sharpened. "And now you expect us to trust you?" Dylan's eyes flickered with something: guilt? Regret? It was hard to say. Trust is a luxury in the face of survival. But we are now bound by it. The Null Weave is beyond our power, Captain. But perhaps together, we can stop it. Together? Morgan's voice held a note of disbelief. "You've kept this secret for centuries, and now you want our help?" Dylan bowed his head slightly, as though acknowledging the weight of his actions. "We are not the protectors of the void. We are merely its prisoners, keeping the dark at bay. But we cannot do it alone anymore." Back aboard the Endeavour, the crew worked tirelessly to decipher the signal that had been growing stronger each day. The proximity to the void was affecting their systems, distorting their sensors, and interfering with communication. It was as though the universe itself was warping around them, pressing in on all sides. The gravity of the situation was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. "We need to act fast," Yara said, her voice tense as she monitored the readings. "The signal is starting to collapse the local spacetime fabric. If we don't get a handle on this, the entire sector could collapse." Morgan stood at the center of the command room, her mind racing. The Null Weave was more than a threat. It was a living entity, one that could unravel everything. History. Memory. Existence itself. And humanity had become entangled in its web. "Where's Velan?" she asked, glancing toward the door. "He's requested a private audience, Captain," Lieutenant Commander Bryce replied, his voice strained. "He says it's urgent." Morgan nodded. "Let him in." Dylan entered the room, his expression grim. "It has begun," he said quietly. "The Null Weave is expanding faster than we anticipated. It is already reaching beyond the void. If we do not act now, we will lose everything." Morgan felt the weight of his words settle over her. The Xelari had been right to keep their distance. But now, their only hope lay in an alliance with the very species they had once feared. "What do we need to do?" Morgan asked, her voice steady despite the rising sense of dread. "We need to sever the threads it has already woven into the fabric of the galaxy," Velan said. "It is not a question of strength, Captain. It is a matter of precision." Morgan nodded, resolute. "Then we'll make it happen. Together." As the Endeavour prepared for its final mission into the heart of the void, the crew braced themselves for the unknown. The Null Weave was waiting, and it was hungry. The heart of the void was silent. For miles around, there was nothing but the inky blackness, punctuated only by distant stars that seemed unreachable, frozen in time. The Endeavour moved slowly, its engines barely making a sound as it navigated toward the epicenter of the Null Weave. Morgan stood at the command center, staring at the blackness before them. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her, each moment more tense than the last. The Null Weave was close, too close. "We've reached the event horizon," Yara announced. Her fingers flew across the console. "This is it. We're in position." Dylan stood beside Morgan, his face etched with concentration. "Now, we wait." The Endeavour's crew was on edge, knowing that the slightest misstep could trigger a chain reaction that would unravel the galaxy itself. The Null Weave was not just a force, it was a living, breathing thing. And now, it was aware of their presence. Morgan took a deep breath, her voice steady. "Prepare the quantum disruptor. We're going to stop this." The countdown began, echoing in the silent void. As the Endeavour braced for impact, Morgan knew that this was their final chance. Either they would sever the threads of the Null Weave, or be lost to it forever. Time fractured as the Endeavour entered the Null Weave's core. Light bent, twisted, and vanished. The ship groaned as if reality itself resisted their intrusion. Screens flickered. Instruments failed. And then, silence. The crew stared, stunned. Outside the viewing deck was not space, but something else. A churning sea of obsidian tendrils, woven through with streaks of electric void light. It pulsed. It breathed. "This is no anomaly," whispered Yara. "It's aware." Morgan's knuckles whitened as she gripped the rail. "Report." "Quantum disruptor charging," said Bryce. "But we've got a problem. Time distortion inside the weave is accelerating. We're experiencing 30 seconds for every one outside. If we don't act fast, years could pass out there while we're stuck in here." Dylan's form shimmered faintly, reacting to the Null Weave's proximity. "The weave recognizes sentient pattern structures. It will try to integrate us. Thoughts, memories, species, it seeks to unmake and absorb." A low hum vibrated through the ship. Crew members began reporting hallucinations, echoes of voices long dead, flashes of places they'd never seen. One technician clutched his head and screamed before vanishing entirely, his console still warm from his touch. "It's already begun," Dylan said grimly. Morgan turned to Bryce. "Initiate the disruptor." A warning blared. "Captain, if we fire from here, the feedback could tear the ship apart." Morgan hesitated, but only for a breath. "Then we find a way deeper in. We get to the core node. And we burn it." Dylan's eyes narrowed. "There is one place, the singularity thread. It is the heart of the weave. But no living mind has ever returned from touching it." Morgan faced her crew. "Then it's time someone did." With engines burning at minimal thrust, the Endeavour began its descent toward the singularity thread, the black tendrils parting before them like a living storm. The ship's shields flared, and power systems blinked in and out as the weave pushed against their presence. Around them, the void whispered, not in sound, but in thoughts. Regrets. Doubts. Memories twisted and turned into weapons. Yara saw her mother's death. Bryce relived the day he lost his brother in the Martian collapse. Morgan heard a child's voice, a child she never had. It was testing them. And if they failed, it wouldn't just end them. It would erase everything they ever were.